I was standing in the kitchen, scrubbing down the counters, something I did every evening after dinner. The smell of fresh bread still hung in the air, a comfort I took for granted. I loved this house, had worked so hard to make it a home. But today it felt off. The air was too still, like the house was holding its breath. I wiped the last spot on the counter and glanced around. The kitchen was the heart of my house. It always had been. But recently, it didn't feel like mine anymore. My sons, John and Mark, stopped by less often. The small talk had turned cold, even forced. John would come by for dinner, of course, but it wasn't the same. He never really stayed to chat like he used to. And Mark had his own life now, which meant less time for me. I tried not to think too much about it. Maybe it was just me, getting older, feeling the weight of the years. It wasn't like I had many people to talk to anymore, just the occasional visitor, the repairman, like Mr. Walker, who came in for small jobs here and there. He was a regular, reliable. I trusted him, and he knew the house as well as I did. He was due to come today to fix the wiring in the kitchen, nothing too big. I figured it was a small thing, some faulty wiring that had been bothering me for a while. Nothing I couldn't handle. But when the doorbell rang, and I opened it to find him standing there, something was different. His usual easy smile was missing. He looked pale and nervous, like he'd seen a ghost. "Hello, Mr. Walker," I said, trying to sound cheerful, though I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. "I didn't expect you so soon. Everything okay?" He didn't answer right away, just stepped past me into the house, muttering something about getting to work. I nodded, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Maybe he was just tired or had a long day. I watched him move toward the kitchen, where the light fixture needed fixing. He didn't even glance my way as he unpacked his tools. His back was stiff, his hands a little shakier than usual. I couldn't help but notice. "You all right?" I asked, stepping closer to him. "You don't seem like yourself today." He turned his head slowly, his eyes darting to mine. Yeah, he said, his voice tight. "Just a long day." But there was no warmth in his words, no usual banter, just a coldness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I nodded, thinking maybe he was just tired, but as he began working, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Maybe it was the silence. He usually talked while he worked, made small jokes, but today there was nothing. I didn't want to press him. After all, it was just a minor job, and I didn't want to be one of those people who asked too many questions. But my mind kept racing. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my gut. Then, as he stood up from his crouched position under the sink, he froze. I could hear him breathe in deeply, his body tense. He turned toward me slowly, and for a moment his face looked terrified. My heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Walker," I said, my voice trembling. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" His lips parted, and he looked at me, his eyes wide. There was something in them, something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Guilt? His hand twitched at his side, but he didn't move. He swallowed, taking a deep breath as if trying to steady himself. And then he spoke, so softly that I almost didn't hear him at first. "Take your stuff and get out. Don't tell your children. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation?" I blinked, unsure if I had heard him right. The words felt like a punch to the gut. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes darted to the attic door, and I saw it, a flicker of panic in his gaze, something he didn't want me to notice. Then, just as quickly, his gaze dropped to the floor, his hands gripping his tool bag tightly. "You need to leave," he said again, his voice shaking. "Take your things. Go now. Don't tell them. Please. It's not safe here." I stood frozen. My mind was racing, my breath caught in my throat. What was he saying? What was happening? Why was he telling me this? Mr. Walker had been coming to my house for years. He had always been kind, even if a little quiet at times. But now, this was something else. I was more than just confused. I was scared. I took a step toward him, trying to understand. Why? What do you mean it's not safe? He shook his head quickly, as if not wanting to get any more involved. I can't explain. I don't know the details. Just trust me. Take your things and go. Don't tell your children. I felt my hands tremble as I gripped the edge of the counter, the room spinning around me. Was he joking? No, this wasn't a joke. This was something serious, something real. I could see it in his eyes. Whatever it wasn't good. I swallowed hard, trying to find the words. What do you mean, don't tell my children? What's going on? His voice grew softer, barely audible. I can't say, but it's bad, Rose, it's bad. You need to leave now. I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand answers, but there was something in his eyes, something that told me I needed to listen. I didn't know why, but I knew I had to. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Okay, I whispered, still unsure of what to do. I'll go. But what is it? What's happening? He didn't answer. He just turned away, walking back to the light fixture. His hands were shaking as he packed up his tools. I stood there for a moment longer, watching him, feeling the weight of his words settle over me like a heavy fog. And then I did it. I grabbed my purse, my coat, and I walked out of my house. It wasn't that I wanted to leave. It was that I knew I had no choice. Something had changed. My house, my life, was no longer safe. And I had no idea what I was walking into. As I stepped out of the house, the weight of Mr. Walker's warning sat heavily on my chest. My mind spun with questions I couldn't answer. What had he meant? Why had he said that? And why did I feel like everything I knew was slipping away? I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I had to find out. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to uncover the truth. My family, my home, my peace, all of it might be at risk, and I wasn't about to let whatever this was take it from me. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I had to begin somewhere. Mr. Walker's words haunted me as I walked through the house. Don't tell your children. The warning echoed in my head like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. What did he mean by that? What was really happening in my own home? I couldn't just sit around and wonder. I needed answers. I needed to understand what was going on, what my sons, my own children, had been hiding from me. And so, I did the only thing I could do. I started looking. I began with my filing cabinet. It wasn't organized, not in any way that would make sense to anyone but me. I knew where everything was, or at least I thought I did. There were old bills, insurance papers, tax forms, and 1,000 other things I had shoved into those drawers over the years. But today, everything felt different. The papers didn't look the same. There was something off about them, like the normal order of things had been upended. My hands shook as I started pulling through the files one by one. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I'd know it when I saw it. And then, just as I was about to give up, I found it. A stack of loan documents, each one signed by John and Mark. The signatures looked right, but something about them made my stomach churn. The documents weren't just loans. Some of them were for huge amounts of money. And what struck me most was that all of them were backed by my house. My house. I sat down hard on the floor. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. My sons had been using my property as collateral for loans without telling me. I stared at the papers, the words on the page blurring together as my mind raced. How long had this been going on? How could they have done this to me? How could they have betrayed me in this way? I couldn't believe it. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that maybe I was misreading things. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. They had done this. John and Mark had been lying to me for years, taking advantage of my trust, using me for their own gain. I could feel the anger building inside me, But it wasn't just anger. It was a deep sense of betrayal. The kind of betrayal that cuts to the bone. These were my children. I had raised them, loved them, given them everything I had. And this was how they repaid me. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to figure out what to do. But I didn't want to share this with just anyone. I needed someone who would understand, someone who wouldn't judge me for the mess my life had become. Sharon, my best friend, my confidant. I called her immediately. "Sharon, I need you," I said when she picked up. My voice sounded shaky even to me, but I couldn't help it. My whole world felt like it was crumbling. She was quiet for a moment. "Of course, Rose. I'll be right over." It didn't take long for Sharon to arrive. I met her at the door, and she could immediately tell something was wrong. I didn't even have to say anything. She saw it in my eyes, in the way I held myself. "Talk to me," Sharon said softly, leading me to the couch. "What's going on?" I handed her the stack of documents. As she flipped through them, I watched her face. I didn't have to say anything. Sharon's expression said it all: shock, disbelief, and finally, understanding. "Rose," she said after a long pause, her voice tight with concern. This is bad. They've been using your house like it's nothing. This isn't just a mistake. They've been doing this for a long time." I nodded, my throat tight. I had no idea. I didn't know what they were doing. I trusted them. I thought they cared about me. Sharon put a hand on mine, her touch gentle. "They've been manipulating you, Rose. And now it's time to stop it. You can't let them get away with this." I looked at her, the weight of the situation sinking in. "I don't know what to do. I feel so lost. These are my sons, but I can't let them do this to me. I can't let them take everything from me." Sharon squeezed my hand. "You don't have to do this alone. You have me, and you need to make them face the consequences, not just expose them, but make them pay for what they've done to you. You deserve that, Rose. You deserve justice." Her words hit me like a wave, crashing over me and washing away the last of my doubt. She was right. I had spent too many years putting everyone else first, making excuses for them, trying to be the good mother, but they weren't doing the same for me. They had crossed a line, and now it was time to fight back. I stood up, suddenly feeling the weight of the decision that lay ahead. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady now, stronger than I'd felt in weeks. "I'm not just going to expose them. I'm going to make them pay for what they've done. They've used me, and now I'm going to use everything I've got to make sure they never do it again." Sharon smiled, a small but encouraging smile. "You've got this, Rose. Let's take it one step at a time. We'll gather all the evidence we can. We'll get the truth out there, and we'll make sure they face what they've done." I nodded. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about standing up for myself finally. I had spent so many years quietly accepting whatever came my way, never questioning it. But now, I was done being a doormat. I wasn't going to let my sons destroy everything I had worked for. I spent the next few hours going through every drawer, every file. I found more documents, more proof of their deceit. They had been taking out loans on my name, forging my signature, using my house like it was nothing. My blood boiled with every piece of evidence I uncovered. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready. I could feel it, the fight inside me waking up. I had been passive for so long, too afraid to confront them. But now I was done. I was ready to show them exactly who they were messing with. Sharon helped me organize everything, and by the time we were done, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had the evidence. I had the truth, and I was going to make them face it. My patience had run out. I had spent years trying to hold my family together, trying to make things work, but now it was time to take control. My sons had been manipulating me for too long, and they weren't going to get away with it. The battle was just beginning, and I wasn't going to stop until I had my justice. I sat alone in the quiet of the house. The only sound, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional creak of the floorboards as I shifted in my seat. The documents in front of me were laid out in an almost cruelly deliberate order. There were no more questions, no more doubts. The truth was right there on paper. I could see it now, as clear as day. My sons, John and Mark, had been using me, manipulating me for far too long. I had trusted them, loved them, and this is how they repaid me. My hands shook slightly as I sorted through the papers. Loan applications, credit statements, bank records, each one more damning than the last. It wasn't just that they had borrowed money in my name. No, it was worse than that. John had been forging my signature on documents, taking out loans, refinancing my property without my knowledge. And Mark, he had been hiding major debts, huge sums, using my credit to cover his own failings. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't need to. The proof was sitting right in front of me. The numbers, the dates, the forged signatures, everything matched up. It was like a puzzle I had pieced together, and now that I saw the picture, I couldn't look away. I went through it all again, just to be sure. I had to be certain before I did anything. But there was no mistaking it now. My sons had been playing me for a fool. They thought they could use me to fix their mistakes, to take what they wanted without facing any consequences. They had used my trust, my kindness, my love for them, to steal from me. And that was something I couldn't and wouldn't forgive. The anger came next. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was anger, pure and hot, burning inside me. I'd raised them both. I'd sacrificed everything for them. And now, here I was, sitting alone with the pieces of their deceit scattered across the table. I couldn't let them get away with this, not after everything they'd taken from me, not after everything they'd stolen. I thought about what Mr. Walker had said. Take your stuff and get out. Don't tell your children. At the time, I had been confused, unsure. But now I understood. I couldn't tell them. I couldn't let them see that I had figured it out. Not yet. I had to plan this carefully, strategically. If I exposed them too soon, it would be over for me. They'd never let me have control again. They'd find a way to twist things around, to make me out to be the villain. No, this had to be done right. I needed to expose them in front of the whole family. I needed everyone to see the truth, to understand what they had done to me. Humiliation, public, undeniable humiliation, would be the only way to make them truly face what they had done. I reached for my phone and called Sharon. She picked up after 2 rings. "Rose," she said, her voice warm but concerned. "How are you holding up?" "I've got everything," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "I've got the proof, everything." "Good," Sharon said. "What's the plan?" "The family gathering," I replied. "I'll do it there. I'll lay it all out for everyone to see. I'll expose them. I'm not going to let them get away with this anymore." Sharon didn't say anything at first. I could almost hear her processing the weight of my words. Finally, she spoke. "You're sure?" she asked. "This is the right move?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the house. It was about the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. I had to make them face it. "I'm sure," I said. "It's time." After hanging up, I stared at the pile of papers again. My mind started racing as I thought about the upcoming confrontation. I could already feel the tension in my chest, the anticipation of what was to come. This was it. The moment everything would change. No more hiding behind polite smiles. No more pretending that everything was fine. My sons had crossed a line, and now they would pay for it. I spent the next few hours organizing everything, making sure I had all my ducks in a row. I couldn't leave any holes. No way for them to worm their way out of this. Every loan, every forged document, every single thing they had done to manipulate me, I had it all. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. By the time I was finished, I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the calm before the storm, I knew that. But it was also a sense of power, something I hadn't felt in years, I'd been passive for so long, letting my sons do whatever they wanted, letting them walk all over me. But not anymore. Now I was in control. Now I was going to make them face the consequences of their actions. I couldn't wait for the family gathering. I wasn't just going to expose them in front of the others. I was going to make them squirm, make them see what they had done. There was no more holding back, no more pretending I didn't know. They had hurt me, and I was going to make sure they felt the sting of it. As the day of the gathering approached, I spent more time going over the details. I imagined their faces when they saw what I had, when they realized I knew everything. I could already feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment everything would change. For so long, I had let them take advantage of me. I had let them think they could get away with anything. But now, I was steps ahead of them. And that made all the difference. I was ready. As the day of reckoning drew closer, I could feel the weight of what was coming. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was empowered. I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me any longer. The family gathering was just the beginning. This was my moment, my chance to finally take control. The day of the family gathering arrived, and I felt a strange calmness settle over me. It wasn't the nervous kind of calm, but a quiet, steady determination. I had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, trying to make everything look fine when it wasn't. But today, that was going to change. Today, I was going to speak the truth, and there was no turning back. The house felt different somehow, like the walls were closing in around me as I prepared for what was about to unfold. I set the table carefully, just like I always did. The plates were arranged neatly, silverware polished, and the glasses sparkling clean. It all looked so normal, so routine, but inside, I was a storm ready to break. I wasn't sure how my sons would react. John, always so confident and self-assured, and Mark, the one who used to be so gentle, now distant and angry. They had both come here today for dinner, probably thinking it would be like any other family meal. But I knew better. This dinner wouldn't be like the others. It couldn't be. Sharon had been by earlier to offer her support, and she had urged me to go through with it. "Don't let them weasel out of this," she had said. "They've hurt you, Rose, and they need to answer for it." I nodded, agreeing. I was ready to face them. When John and Mark walked in, they seemed oblivious to what was coming. John smiled and gave me a quick hug, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Mark stood by the door, glancing around the room, his usual nervous energy palpable. We sat down to eat, the usual small talk filling the air. But as we ate, I could feel the weight of what I had to do pressing down on me. Every bite, every word, felt like it was building up to something. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I couldn't pretend I didn't know what they had done. Finally, when the last of the dinner plates had been cleared away, I stood up. My hands were steady now. Though my heart pounded in my chest, I knew what had to be done. "John, Mark," I began, my voice calm but firm. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've discovered, and I don't want any more lies." They looked at me, both of them trying to keep their expressions neutral, but I could see the flicker of concern in their eyes. "I've been going through some of the paperwork," I continued, watching their faces closely. "And I found something I should have found a long time ago." I reached into the folder I had set on the table and pulled out the first stack of documents. Their eyes followed my hands as I slid the papers across the table toward them. John was the first to pick them up. He quickly scanned the top page, then glanced at Mark. I saw him swallow hard, his face paling. He knew what was coming. "Mum, you don't understand," John started, but I cut him off. "No, John," I said, my voice steady. "I understand perfectly." I looked at Mark, who was sitting stiffly in his chair, his face flushed. "I know about the loans, the credit cards, the refinancing. I know you've been using my name, using my house for collateral without even telling me." Mark's jaw clenched. "Mum, it's not what you think," he said quickly, his voice tight with nerves. We We were just trying to make things work. You know how hard things have been for us. We never meant for you to find out." "Don't lie to me," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "You've been lying to me for years. For years, you've been using me, Mark. And you, John." I turned back to him, and I could see the panic in his eyes now. He wasn't as confident as he'd been earlier. "You're both in over your heads," I continued, "and you thought I wouldn't find out." "Well, I did." I pushed the rest of the papers across the table. "These are the loan documents, the credit agreements, everything. I've seen your signatures on the papers. I know what you've done, and you're not getting away with it." John's face twisted in frustration, his fists clenching in his lap. "Mum, this isn't what you think," he said again, his voice rising. "We were just trying to help you, trying to make things easier for you. We did it for you." "For me," I repeated, my voice growing colder. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted you to use my home as collateral? To put everything I've worked for in jeopardy? No, John, you did this for yourselves. You did it because you thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't question what you were doing." Mark was silent now, his eyes flickering nervously between John and me. He couldn't defend himself anymore. Neither of them could. The silence stretched between us. I could feel the weight of the truth hanging in the air. The family, who had always been loyal to them, could hear it now. They could see the deceit, the lies, for what they really were. Finally, after what felt like forever, John let out a frustrated breath. "You don't get it," he snapped. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just business. We didn't think it would come to this." "You didn't think I would find out," I said, leaning forward. "You didn't think about how this would affect me, or how it would affect the family." I turned to the rest of the family, who had been sitting in stunned silence up until now. I saw their faces, my brother, my sister, even a few of the cousins, slowly turning from the sons they had always defended to the people they were seeing for the first time. They were starting to understand, starting to see the truth. John and Mark's faces were flushed with shame, but neither of them was ready to admit what they had done. They tried to cover their tracks, but it was too late. Their lies had already been exposed. I could see them squirming now, trying to figure out what to say next. But it was over. The walls were closing in around them, and there was nothing they could do to escape the truth. Rose watched, a quiet satisfaction rising in her chest. The family that had once stood behind John and Mark was now questioning everything they'd been told. There was no turning back now. This was only the beginning. As the family's loyalty began to shift, I knew this was just the first step. I had made them face the truth, but it wasn't over yet. The road ahead was still long, and I wasn't about to let them off the hook. Not after everything they had done. Not after everything they had stolen from me. I sat at the kitchen table, the pile of documents in front of me feeling heavier than ever. Each paper, each signature, each date, it all told the same story. My sons, John and Mark, had gone too far. But now, as I stared at the final piece of the puzzle, I realized there was one last betrayal I hadn't uncovered. A betrayal that was more devastating than anything I had already found. It was a deed, one I had never seen before. My house, the one I had worked so hard to make a home, the place I had raised my children in, was being transferred out of my name. The deed was already signed, and it wasn't just any transfer. They were giving it to themselves, or rather, to a company they had set up behind my back. It was a move so underhanded, so cold, that I could barely breathe as I looked at it. They had gone further than just using my name for loans. They were trying to take away my home entirely. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How could they do this? How could they think they could get away with it? I had always done everything for them. They were my sons. I had given them everything I had, including the roof over their heads. And this? This was how they repaid me. They hadn't just taken money from me or used my property for their gain. They were trying to take my life, my legacy, the very thing that had given me meaning in this world. The anger hit me like a freight train. My heart was racing, my hands shaking as I held the deed in my fingers. The final straw, the thing that would make it impossible for me to turn back. It was time to end this. There was no more room for excuses, no more trying to reason with them. They had crossed a line that could never be undone. I was done being manipulated, done being used. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had to do this calmly, carefully, but I also had to make sure they understood. They needed to see the full scope of what they had done. I wasn't just going to expose them anymore. I was going to make them pay for what they'd done. The family dinner was coming up. A few cousins were expected to join us, as they always did on Sundays. They would be here, sitting at the table with me. This was the moment. I couldn't wait any longer. I carefully gathered all the evidence, everything I had uncovered about the loans, the forgeries, and now this. The deed was the final piece. I put it all together in a folder, neatly arranged, ready to go. I knew exactly how I would handle it. I would confront them in front of the family. There would be no more room for denial, no more space for their lies. The dinner came, and as the family arrived, I could feel the tension building in my chest. I made small talk, pretending everything was fine, but all the while, my mind was focused on the plan. John and Mark were both here, both acting as if nothing had changed. John, ever the confident one, smiled and joked like always, but I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. Mark, on the other hand, barely spoke. He didn't meet my gaze, and I could tell he was already bracing himself for something. Finally, after we had eaten, I stood up, my heart pounding. This was it. There was no turning back. "John, Mark," I began, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." They both looked at me, confused at first. The family around the table quieted, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The conversation that had been lively moments before turned still, like the calm before a storm. "I've been looking into some things," I continued, taking the folder and placing it on the table in front of them. "And what I've found, well, it's not something I can ignore anymore. I've seen everything. The loans, the forgeries, the debt, and now, this." I pulled the deed from the folder and placed it in front of them. John's eyes widened as he scanned the document, and I saw Mark's face pale. Neither of them could hide the shock. "Mom, you don't understand," John said quickly, trying to brush it off, but his voice was shaky now. "This is just a misunderstanding. We were trying to help you." "Help me?" I interrupted, my voice colder than I intended. "Is this how you help me? You take my home, you use my name to get loans, you sign documents in my name without asking me. You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you?" John opened his mouth, but no words came out. Mark looked at the table, unable to meet my gaze. "I trusted you both," I continued, my voice thick with emotion, but my resolve stronger than ever. "I loved you, and you betrayed me. You thought you could take what you wanted without facing the consequences, but I'm done letting you use me." I could feel the weight of my words as they hung in the air. The rest of the family sat in stunned silence, watching, waiting for what would happen next. They could see the truth now. They could see the betrayal in black and white, right in front of their eyes. John and Mark's attempts to explain themselves only made them look more guilty. They couldn't talk their way out of this. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," I said, the words coming out harsh, bitter, "because there's nothing to forgive. What you've done to me, it can't be forgiven. Not this time." Mark finally spoke, but his voice was weak. "Mom, please, you don't understand. We didn't mean for it to go this far." "Oh, but it did," I said, my voice steely, unyielding. "It went too far the moment you decided to use my name, my home, for your gain. And now you'll face the consequences." There was no hiding it anymore. The family that had once been so loyal to them, my sons, was starting to look at them differently. Their faces were no longer filled with sympathy. They weren't defending them anymore. Instead, there was uncertainty, disappointment, shame. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and John's usual confidence had vanished. His face was pale, his mouth tight with anger and regret. "This isn't over, Rose," John finally said, his voice full of bitterness. "You can't just take everything from us. We're your sons. We've worked hard for everything." "No," I replied, shaking my head. "You've worked hard to take everything from me, and now you'll pay the price." As I said the words, I could feel the weight of them, but I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to let them continue to walk all over me. Not anymore. As I watched my sons squirm under the weight of their lies, I knew the battle was far from over. The family had seen the truth. There was no going back for John and Mark. I had taken the first step, but there was more to do. They had stolen from me, used me, and now they would pay. This wasn't just about exposing them anymore. This was about justice, and it was time for them to face it. The house felt strangely quiet as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal papers spread out before me. The documents were a final step, a necessary move to take back what was rightfully mine. For so long, I had allowed John and Mark to control the narrative, to pull the strings from behind the scenes. But no more. Today, I was taking back my power. The weight of the decision was heavy, and my hands trembled slightly as I reached for the phone to dial my lawyer's number. It wasn't fear that made me shake. It was the finality of it all. Once these papers were signed, there would be no going back. I would have done what I needed to do, but the consequences would be irreversible. They were my sons, after all. But the betrayal had been too much. I couldn't let them get away with it. "Hello, Rose," my lawyer's voice came through, steady and professional. "How can I help you today?" "I need to finalize everything," I said, my voice firm despite the emotion swirling inside me. "I want to make sure that they can't touch my house or my estate anymore. I've had enough. It's time to end this." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear him weighing my words. "Are you sure? I understand how difficult this is, but once we file, they won't have any claim. You'll be severing all ties with them legally." "I'm sure," I said, my voice cold. "I've been pushed to my limit, and I'm done. I need to take back control, and I'm going to make sure they can never do this to me again." "Understood. I'll have everything prepared for you to sign. I'll also make sure we file the necessary documents to make sure they're removed from any claims to your property or assets." I hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger was still there, deep in my chest, but it had become something else. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was resolve. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. I sat there for a while, just staring at the papers in front of me. These weren't just legal documents, they were my weapon. They would give me everything I needed to reclaim what was mine. But it wasn't just about the house. It was about making sure John and Mark would never recover from the damage they had done to me. I couldn't let them walk away from this. They needed to understand that their actions had consequences, real, permanent consequences. They'd used me, betrayed me, and lied to my face for far too long. I couldn't let them continue to live in their fantasy world where they thought they could get away with anything. I wasn't going to just take back my house. I was going to expose them for who they truly were. I wasn't just going to hurt them financially. I was going to make sure they lost everything that mattered to them. Their reputations, their friends, their connections. I was going to burn it all to the ground. The plan was simple. I would file the legal documents that would sever their claim to my property and estate, and then I would take it public. I would make sure everyone knew what they had done. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing the world the truth. They had manipulated me for years, used my trust against me, and it was time for the world to see what kind of people they really were. I took a deep breath, the weight of my decision settling over me once again. This was it. No turning back. But the resolve inside me only grew stronger. I'd spent my life taking care of others, my children, my family, my home. and I had never asked for anything in return. But now I was doing something for myself. I was taking control, and I was going to make sure I didn't let them or anyone else take advantage of me again. The lawyer called me back shortly after with the finalized documents. He assured me everything was in order and explained the process in detail. I had one final signature to make. I took the pen in my hand, felt the weight of it in my palm, and signed my name with a steady hand. It was done. As I put the pen down, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. I had reclaimed my power, and I was finally in control. John and Mark were about to learn the hard way that betrayal has consequences. The next step was to go public with the truth. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be backlash, that some people would still try to defend them. But I didn't care anymore. They had taken from me for too long, and now it was my turn to make sure they paid the price. I thought about the dinner, the next family gathering I would be attending. It would be the perfect time to expose them. I had all the evidence, all the proof I needed. No one would be able to deny the truth once I showed them what my sons had done. I would stand in front of everyone, lay out the facts, and let them see John and Mark for who they really were. I didn't care if it hurt them. I didn't care if it tore the family apart. They deserved to face the consequences of their actions, and I was going to make sure they did. The weight of everything I was about to do hung heavy in my chest, but I didn't waver. I had made my choice, and now I had to follow through. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. I was fighting to take back what they had stolen from me. As I prepared for the next step, the family gathering that would change everything, I knew I was closer than ever to finishing what I had started. John and Mark thought they had won. They thought they could get away with it all. But I was steps ahead of them, and I was ready to expose them for the frauds they were. There was no going back now. They would face the consequences of their actions, and I would make sure the world knew the truth. The day of the family gathering arrived, and I had never felt more certain of my decision. The house was filled with the usual noise, laughter, clinking silverware, and the hum of conversation. John and Mark had arrived, just as they always did, carrying the same air of casual entitlement. But today, everything was different. Today, the truth would come crashing down around them. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, weeks of gathering evidence, consulting with lawyers, and planning my every move. I had filed the papers to transfer full ownership of the house back into my name. It was mine, after all. It always had been, and with those papers I had secured my future. John and Mark had no claim on it anymore, but I wasn't stopping there. I wasn't just taking back what they'd tried to steal from me. I was going to expose them. Every lie, every deceit. I was going to make sure the world knew who they really were. The dinner started off as it usually did. I watched them play their parts. John, always the confident one, cracking jokes with the family, pretending everything was fine. Mark, ever the quiet one, sitting back and barely saying a word. But the tension in the room was palpable. I knew they had no idea what was coming. I had kept everything under wraps, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the evening wore on, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I had to do this. The time for subtlety had passed. It was time to lay everything out. I waited until dessert was served, the moment when everyone was just a little too relaxed, when their guard was down. I stood up, slowly, deliberately, and all eyes turned to me. The room went quiet, as if the air itself had thickened with anticipation. My heart pounded, but I didn't falter. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "John, Mark," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "I need to tell everyone something that can't wait any longer." They both looked at me, confused but not yet worried. John opened his mouth to speak, probably ready with one of his usual excuses, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "I've had enough of the lies," I continued, my gaze sweeping across the room. "I've had enough of you using me for your own gain. It ends tonight." The room was silent. No one spoke, Everyone seemed to sense the shift, the change in the air. "I filed the papers today," I said, letting the words sink in. "The house is mine. I've legally removed both of you from any claim to it." There was a collective gasp from the family. I watched as John's face tightened, his confident smile slipping, replaced by something darker. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his face paling. He knew exactly what was coming. "But that's not all," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I've been going through the records, everything you've done, and I have proof of your fraud, of the lies you've been telling, and the way you've manipulated me for years." I saw John's jaw clench. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked at Mark, and then back at me, as if he was trying to figure out what to say. But I had already won. There was nothing left for them to say. "I know about the loans," I said, my voice steady. "The forgeries, the debt you've been hiding in my name. I know about everything. And now, everyone here knows too." I watched as the weight of my words hit them. The family was looking at John and Mark differently now. The shock in their eyes was unmistakable. For the first time, they were seeing the truth. The two men they had defended, the sons they had trusted, were not who they appeared to be. I could feel their discomfort. John was sweating now, his usual bravado replaced by desperation. He looked at Mark, but Mark didn't meet his eyes. The damage was done. There was no going back. "You think this is just about the house, don't you?" I said, my voice growing colder. "This isn't just about money. This is about the way you've treated me, the way you've used me. You've stolen from me, manipulated me, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." John stood up, his face red with anger. "This is crazy, Mom. You don't know what you're talking about. We did this for you," he yelled. "You were going to lose everything. We were trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I echoed, my voice sharp. "By taking everything from me? By forging my name and signing my house over to yourselves? Is that your idea of protection?" Mark finally spoke up, but his voice was weak, almost pleading. "Mom, please. You don't understand. We didn't want it to go this far." "Don't lie to me, Mark," I said, my tone cold. "You've both lied to me for years. I trusted you, and you betrayed me." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "And now you're going to pay for it. Not just financially, but in every way possible. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. You've ruined your own reputations, and there's no way out of it now." John opened his mouth to protest, but he was cut off by the phone ringing. It was the law firm. I answered it quickly, holding the phone to my ear as I kept my eyes on my sons. "Yes," I said, my voice still calm, but filled with authority. The lawyer on the other end gave a brief update, confirming that the documents had been filed and that public notices would be going out the next day. I put the phone down, knowing that the final blow had been struck. The world would soon know the truth, and there was nothing John and Mark could do to stop it. As I looked at them, I saw their world beginning to unravel. Their professional connections, business partners, friends, even distant relatives, would soon hear about their deceit. People would start to question everything they had ever said, every deal they had ever made. The weight of their lies was already crushing them, and they hadn't even realized the full extent of the damage yet. The family members who had once stood by them, who had once believed in their innocence, were now looking at them with disbelief. I could feel the shift in the room as people started to talk among themselves, murmurs of shock and disgust filling the air. John and Mark were no longer the golden boys. They were the villains, and there was no escaping that. I felt a strange sense of power wash over me as I watched them squirm. The tables had turned. They were the ones who had used me, but now I had used everything they had done against them. They couldn't escape anymore. I had taken everything from them, everything they had stolen from me, and everything they had used to build their lives on lies. Now it was over. As I watched John and Mark crumble under the weight of their own deceit, I knew that there was no turning back. The damage had been done, and I had done it. Their world was collapsing around them, and it was only the beginning. I had won, and they would never recover from what they had done to me. The days after the family dinner passed in a blur. The weight of everything I had revealed hung heavily in the air, but there was no turning back now. My sons, John and Mark, were unraveling. Their lives, their reputations, and their connections were crumbling. The aftermath of their actions was far more than just about money or houses. It was about betrayal. And that betrayal had caused an irreversible ripple effect. The phone call came at an unexpected time. I was sitting in the living room, still processing the fallout from the dinner, when the screen on my phone lit up. It was Olivia, Mark's wife. I hadn't heard from her since the dinner, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I answered quickly, my heart already pounding in my chest. I had a feeling she had come to some conclusions of her own. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Rose," Olivia's voice was thick with emotion. "I need to talk to you." I felt a chill run down my spine. Something in her tone told me this wasn't going to be good news for Mark. "What's happened, Olivia?" I asked, my mind racing. There was a pause, and I could hear Olivia take a shaky breath. "I know everything. I've seen the documents. I've seen what Mark has done. I had no idea. I didn't know he had gone this far. I'm so sorry, Rose. I never knew he was capable of this." I sat back, my heart pounding in my chest. I had expected some kind of confrontation, but hearing her words made my stomach tighten. I had been prepared for Mark to try and salvage something, to make excuses, to play the victim. But this was different. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "How did you find out?" "I went through his things," Olivia said, her voice shaking. "I had a feeling, Rose. After the dinner, I started putting things together. I looked through his emails, his financial records. I found everything. Everything you said was true. He's been lying to me, just like he lied to you. And worse than that, he's been hiding things from me for years." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Part of me felt vindicated, but the other part of me felt a strange kind of sorrow. Olivia had been dragged into this mess too, and now she was paying the price for Mark's deception. "I can't be with him anymore," Olivia's voice broke as she spoke. "I can't look at him the same way. I can't forgive him for what he's done to you, to us. I thought I knew who he was, but now I don't even recognize him. I'm leaving him, Rose. I can't stay married to a man who has betrayed his own mother like that." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out and comfort her, but the other part of me was stunned. Mark had lost everything. His wife, his partner, was leaving him because of the very thing that had driven me to take action. His lies. "I'm sorry," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have known. I didn't want to believe it, but now I see it for what it is." "It's not your fault, Olivia," I said softly, my own voice thick with emotion. "You couldn't have known. He's a master at hiding the truth. But I'm glad you know now. You deserve to know the truth." There was a long pause. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice much steadier this time. "I'm leaving him, Rose. I'm not coming back. I've already packed my things. I'm going to my sister's for a while." I closed my eyes, taking in her words. Mark was losing everything. His wife, his reputation, his family, everything he had built on lies was crumbling beneath him. It was hard to feel sympathy for him, after everything he'd done. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a strange kind of emptiness. I hadn't wanted this for him, but he had made his choices, and now he was paying the price. "I understand, Olivia," I said quietly. "Take care of yourself, and know that you're not alone in this. I won't forget what you've done, Rose. You've opened my eyes. I need time to process everything." "I understand," I replied. "Take the time you need. Just take care of yourself." The call ended, and I sat there for a long while, staring at the phone in my hand. The victory felt bittersweet. I had reclaimed my life, my house, and my dignity, but in doing so, I had torn my family apart. John and Mark had made their choices, and now they were facing the consequences of those choices. But as I thought about Mark, sitting there alone in his empty house, without his wife by his side, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. He had destroyed everything: his marriage, his family, his reputation. And all for what? Greed? Power? It didn't matter. The result was the same. He had lost it all. The truth was, I didn't want to destroy him, but I couldn't allow him to continue down this path. He had to face the consequences of his actions, just like John had. They both needed to understand that their lies, their deceit, had come at a price. I went to the window and looked out at the street, watching the cars pass by. The world outside seemed so peaceful, so normal. But inside my house, everything had changed. I had taken back control. And while it felt good to know that I was no longer a victim of their manipulations, I couldn't ignore the cost of it all. Mark had lost his wife. John had lost his trust within the family. But more than that, they had lost their integrity. And once that was gone, there was no getting it back. Olivia's departure from Mark was the final nail in the coffin. He had lost everything, and while I stood victorious, having taken back control of my life and my home, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet satisfaction. The family I had known was now torn apart, and I was left standing in the ruins of it all. But I wasn't sorry. I had done what I had to do, and now nothing would ever be the same again. The days following the family dinner felt like they were dragging on, each minute stretching longer than the last. But the moment I had been waiting for was finally here. The final confrontation, the moment when everything I had fought for, everything I had exposed, would come to a head. It was time for John and Mark to face the consequences of their actions, and I was ready. The house felt different now, emptier somehow. The silence between us had become palpable, even when we were in the same room. It wasn't just the quiet from the lack of conversation, but the weight of everything that had happened. For so long, I had been the one making excuses for them, ignoring their lies, pushing my own discomfort aside. But now, I had no intention of turning a blind eye anymore. Not after everything they had done. They arrived as usual, their steps hesitant as they crossed the threshold. John, as always, had that confident air about him, his posture perfect, his smile wide. But today it looked forced. The usual bravado was gone from his eyes, replaced with a wariness I hadn't seen before. Mark, on the other hand, walked in like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His usual quietness was more pronounced, his face pale, as if he knew exactly what was coming. Dinner passed, like it usually did. Awkward silences, small talk to fill the void, and laughter that didn't quite reach anyone's eyes. But I could feel the tension, the weight of the secret I was holding, pressing against the walls, growing thicker with each passing minute. Finally, after we had finished eating, the moment arrived. I could feel my pulse quicken as I stood up. The time had come. The family was still sitting at the table, eating dessert, chatting, unaware of what was about to happen, but I wasn't going to wait for the perfect moment. There was no perfect moment, no more pretending. I had waited too long to remain silent. "John, Mark," I began, my voice steady, though inside I could feel a tremor. "We need to talk." They both looked at me, their faces a mix of confusion and apprehension. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I could see them both trying to gauge what was going on. Maybe they thought it would be another one of their excuses, a distraction, a way to brush things under the rug, but I wasn't going to let that happen this time. "I've had enough of the lies," I said, my voice hardening as I went on. "I've had enough of being manipulated. I've spent years turning a blind eye, thinking you would change, but now I see the truth, and so does everyone else." I watched them shift uncomfortably. John opened his mouth to speak, probably to defend himself, but I didn't give him the chance. I already knew their responses. I already knew the game they were going to try to play. There was no way they could talk their way out of this anymore. You've lied to me, I continued. Used me, manipulated me, and put my home at risk. You thought I wouldn't notice. But I did. I've seen the loans, the forgeries, the documents. I know everything. And now, so does everyone else. I could see the realization hit them. John's face turned red with frustration. Mark, too, shifted in his seat, looking down at his hands. The tension in the room thickened. Their usual confidence, their ability to control the narrative, was gone. There was no denying what I had uncovered. I reached for the folder on the table and slowly slid the papers toward them. They both glanced down, and I could see their eyes scanning the documents, the loans they had taken in my name, the signatures that were not mine, the debts they had hidden away. The lies were laid bare, and there was nothing they could do to undo it. I let the silence hang for a moment before I spoke again. And this, I said, tapping the final document, is the one that really gets me, the deed to the house, signed without my knowledge. You were trying to take everything from me, my home, my legacy. You thought I wouldn't find out, but I did, and now you have nothing left. John's expression twisted in anger. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, his face contorted with frustration. This is insane, Mum. You don't get it. We did this to protect you. We didn't want you to lose everything. Don't you dare, I interrupted sharply. Don't you dare try to justify what you did. You didn't do it for me. You did it for you. You used me, John. You used my trust, my name, and now you've lost it all. Mark sat quietly, his eyes downcast, his hands trembling. Mum, please, he said in a near whisper. I didn't want it to go this far. We were just trying to make things work. You've got to understand. I understand perfectly, I shot back, my voice growing colder. You didn't want it to go this far. Well, it did. And now you'll face the consequences. The family members sitting at the table had fallen silent. I could feel their eyes on us, watching this all unfold. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, but it was the silence of truth, one that no amount of excuses or denial could cover up. I turned to the family, my voice steady but firm. You all need to know what kind of people they are. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about betrayal, about using me, and now they'll have to live with that. They're not the victims here. They're the ones who hurt me, and now it's time for them to face the truth. I could see the shock on their faces, the disbelief that something like this could have happened. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. I had exposed their lies. I had stripped away the facade they had built, and now there was nothing left. John and Mark didn't have anything left to say. Their attempts to explain, to justify their actions, only made it worse. The more they spoke, the deeper they dug themselves into a hole they couldn't escape. Finally, they both fell silent. Neither of them had anything else to say. They stood up, defeated. The proud, arrogant men who had once believed they could control everything and everyone were now broken. Their heads were hung low as they turned to leave. There was no argument left, no fight left in them. They had lost everything, everything they had tried to steal from me, everything they had once used to manipulate and deceive. I stood there, watching them go. I felt nothing for them anymore. No anger, no sadness, no relief. Just a quiet sense of finality. They were gone, and everything I had fought for was finally mine again. I closed the door behind them, the sound of the lock clicking echoing in the silence. The weight of everything I had done, everything I had exposed, settled in. My home was mine. My life was mine. And now, it was over.